Thank you for checking out the Littrell Show, building businesses, bars, and brands. I'm Jason, and on this episode, I'm pleased to welcome Sharon Salmon from Atoll. Atoll is a boutique HR and business operations firm based out of New York, and they specialize in career ladders, respect, empathy, and just building happy teams. Sharon shared her insight on the difference between Shake Shack and In-N-Out, positive leadership, and much more. So I'm so excited to welcome Sharon Salmon.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
Tell me about your business. What does your business do?
So I primarily focus in HR and business operations for restaurants and bars and primarily any organization that's kind of in the hospitality industry. And I started it, I want to say it's about 5 years now in San Francisco. I was working for a restaurant consulting firm there, and it was primarily R&D development for large scale kind of Dave & Buster's, AMC, things like that. And we would get a lot of calls, or I'd get a lot of requests from people who had a small deli or a pizza shop or something like that saying, hey, can you help us with operations? We just need some help with this legal piece about breaks or, overtime laws or whatever. And I asked the guys, hey, can I kind of focus on this? They were like, yeah, we're not interested in that piece.
It's small potatoes, right?
Yeah. And so I was like, great. And they said, if it's not a conflict, definitely have fun with it. And it just kind of took off.
It seems like a kind of a rewarding pivot, working with the little guy versus working with, 1,000, arcade machines.
Yeah. I say this on my website, and it was kind of I'd hate to say pitch, but it was my little elevator pitch in the beginning, but it was to give affordable experience to the small mom and pops. And it was primarily because I was watching these organizations that really didn't need my support. They had HR teams and things like that. And it was the mom and pops who I frequent. I don't go to large chains. I don't eat at these, Chili's and things like that. Not to say there's anything wrong with it, but I prefer kind of like my local spots. And those are the organizations, the companies, the people, the humans that I kind of like felt more close with. And I was like, hey, how can I do this and like support them and make it affordable? And when these companies pay me, so if a consulting firm does pay me, they have to put a fee on top of my fee or my hourly rate to put money in their pocket. And so
mark it up.
Yeah, I'm going to just cut out the middleman and just, make it really affordable. And that's what I did.
Well, I'm really curious about the cost of not hiring you. But before we get into that, just for a little bit of context, what's your background in restaurants and bars?
Oh, yeah. So when I was about 14, I worked in a biker bar doing dishes and serving beer. Totally illegal. But the bar's still around. It's in San Diego, called the Flynn Springs Inn.
I'm from San Diego.
I didn't know that. What part?
From Allied Gardens del Cerro, but when I was in East County for a long time, and I worked at Shooter's Cocktails. My first job was at Hooley's.
Oh my God, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
That's my stomping ground, man. I'm East County, El Capitan High School.
East County Townie, nice.
Yep, really classy.
Wow. Okay, that's so crazy. Okay, so you're 14. I'm sorry, I totally cut you off. I was just like so excited. I just was like, there's somebody else from San Diego here. Amazing.
Oh, nine. Yeah, so I was 14, working in a biker bar in San Diego in the kind of middle of nowhere-ish. It was called the Flynn Springs Inn, and I was doing dishes, serving beer to the bikers on Sunday that would come in after their long rides. And it was kind of a messy situation. There was just a bunch of us high school girls or junior high to high school who shouldn't probably have been doing what we were doing, but we had so much fun. And that was kind of like my foray into the world. And then after that, I worked for an Italian restaurant being a hostess. And then, my big claim to fame is I was a sandwich artist at Subway for about 2 years. So, that was kind of my segue into the world in high school.
Well, that's, the irony is pretty thick that, being underage and serving alcohol, you have to be 21 in California, by the way, or at least at that time, because I grew up in Dives in San Diego as well, especially in East County, not too far away from where you were. And it's kind of ironic that you ended up at this point in your career working in HR, where compliance is something that you probably keep your eye on.
And it's not lost on me. It is so funny. That's why I kind of laugh at it and think, oh my gosh, if the 40-something Sharon could go back and tell that 14-something-year-old Sharon, hey, this isn't legal, I still probably would have done it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think Sharon would talk to Sharon. Sharon would probably talk to Sharon's boss.
Exactly. This Sharon would have talked to Sharon's boss, but that 14-year-old Sharon would have still done what I did. I mean, I had a blast and it was illegal, but it was just a different time too. And HR wasn't something that I think was really mindful in any space. And it was really rare if you sued. California became pretty litigious, I want to say, more in the late 90s, early 2000s, when people started becoming a little bit more aware about, their rights. And and it just wasn't a thing. So it was very rare someone spoke up.
I mean, in those days, was there such a prevalent like plaintiffs bar and like where there would be like just crazy class action lawsuits, like tort reform is a big deal in the upper levels of government. But right now, basically, especially in New York, I mean, you see these very, very frivolous lawsuits and very predatory lawsuits happening. But we'll get into that. But like your company is set up to help people insulate themselves from those kind of risks, right?
Yeah, I'm really looking for your risks and rewards. Your risks are any liability that can be in terms of the way that you're not compliant or the way that, safety, let's say workers' comp risks. So I'm usually looking through those things in like the early on audit when I'm talking. And most of the clients will come to me with like one basic thing. Hey, we need help with recruiting, or we need a handbook done. And once I build a relationship with them, then they start sharing where they're kind of nervous about maybe something that they're not compliant in. And then Pandora's box opens and I realize, oh my goodness, like employees are not getting breaks, or they're not paying a break spread, or they're not, or a shift spread, or they're not ... And so then we work on those things.
Your clients, are they mostly bars and restaurants, like on-premise, tipped employees, that kind of traditional setup? Or do you have any like kind of non-traditional clients that are like quick service restaurants or anything like that?
I have done fast casual. I actually am a very tiny equity owner in a fast casual restaurant in California. I have helped so many restaurants open, and bars primarily, I usually get brought in usually when there's some kind of issue and it's maybe an investigation or they're not sure if they can terminate someone. So it really depends. And yes, I do it all, but I would say in California, because a lot of my work still comes from my network in San Francisco Bay Area. I do even work in the healthcare field where they have culinary departments, they have nutrition departments, and because it's still functions like a restaurant, but it has to follow the same laws, but it doesn't have the same kind of like pay for reward, hey, I need to pay you plus there's a tip. It's a little bit different. So the incentives to get people to work in that field are very different, and they're competing with the Apples and the Googles out there for their, culinary departments. So I kind of work in all of them, and it's kind of spread. So the laws in California are very different than the laws in New York. And the jobs that I get here, primarily small restaurants. I've done a couple of, they're considered fast casual in some places, but in New York, they're considered fast food. So it really depends. I do it all, but every state's a little bit different how they interact and who has the most risk. And so I kind of just get brought in with whatever. I'm kind of agnostic.
Yeah, no, that seems really interesting considering the amount of local, state, and federal rules that you have to abide by. Do you operate in all 50 states, or do you have like specific territories? Like, in lawyers, they have to pass the bar, so they can't practice in anywhere except for those specific states. But can you work anywhere? Do you work anywhere?
I do. And the interesting piece is after I started growing my business in the restaurant kind of hospitality world, I started getting a lot of non-restaurant work. And I was first hired by a company called Mercer when I moved to New York.
Mercer, like the tools?
Mercer Consulting. So Mercer is a big insurance broker that primarily works in like the gas kind of industry and like, I would say natural disasters. So if something happens, they'll send out their insurance team and say, okay, there was a tsunami in this country. We need to go assess the damage. And they fund essentially the insurance, contract for countries and for local municipalities and things like that. It's really boring stuff. But
it sounds like it's companies like that kind of decide our future.
Exactly. Oh, it's actually, when I was getting onboarded, it was kind of a little bit brother scary. And they saw a market where they said, hey, we want to actually essentially do what I did, but go into small businesses and offer this smaller service. And they were charging $250 an hour. And then they paid me a piece of that and they would feed me business. And the only problem is $250 an hour for a small restaurant is a lot. And the companies that I was getting fed were like Dos Toros and, big money makers and chains that could afford this kind of work. And I was going
to say Dos Toros just opened number 18. I think they're doing okay.
They're doing okay. And they have a really thought forward HR leader and they have an HR team. And so they really didn't need me. But then at the same time, I was just watching other clients start coming in and I started getting non-restaurant-y clients. And a lot of consulting firms will pass me work and obviously take this like little piece of commission. And that's totally fine. And they started sending me exempt employees. So in a restaurant, it's non-exempt, which means hourly, and an exempt is salaried essentially. And it's so much easier. So I just started doing that kind of work. So now I've become industry agnostic and classification agnostic, and I do it all. I still do restaurants. It's my favorite thing. If a restaurant will come to me, I almost kind of treat it as my kind of passion project.
The listenership that I'm trying to cultivate is like the bartenders and chefs out there that are trying to use their skills to leverage into ownership, into owning something, because that is the true path to independence and freedom, is owning your own shop. Now, it's not to say that if you work for somebody that you're a sucker. I'm just saying that like for some people, like about 20% of the people, they're like, that is their path of independence. So to that person who is an epic practitioner of whatever it is, whether it's creating a dish or creating a cocktail, building a bar, they can't be a master of everything. A lot of places, and especially in places like New York, where there's, I would characterize it as a almost hostile relationship between small business and the local government, where you have to make the choice of, are you compliant or are you profitable? Where does your service fit into that? And why should people hire you rather than trying to figure it out and learn it themselves?
Well, it comes down to what they're excited about. And it's very rare that a cook is excited about when, let's say it is a chef and he says, I'm going to open up my own restaurant, or it's a bartender who says, I'm going to open up my own bar. And it's very rare someone saying, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about running a payroll. This is like totally why I'm doing it. I also want to make sure that I'm taking care of my employees and I'm creating career ladders for them and things like that. It doesn't excite me to actually say, hey, I want to mix this drink and I want to build this amazing drink. I just want to drink the amazing drink that you build. And so we all have our thing that we're really excited about. And I say, focus on that thing that you're excited about rather than waste time and start having to learn the laws. Because even I have to study almost every day about the laws. And there's a law right now that I'm debating with a few HR people about how often you have to pay in New York, where one law from their labor website says you have to pay restaurant workers weekly, but a lot of restaurants are paying biweekly. And then there's another law on a different state website that says you can pay biweekly, but it doesn't designate it to be hospitality workers. And so it's really confusing. And if you want to pay an attorney to do it, they can, but they're $300 plus an hour. And so I usually can spot those things and just say it pretty quickly for them rather than them have to sift through all these websites. I did have one owner say to me once, I did not get into this business to take care of my employees. I want to take care of my customers, and my employees should be excited to help me do that. And it was such an awakening moment because I said, this is not their business. And unless you're paying them equity, you're paying them an hourly wage that most of the time doesn't even pay their full cost of expense to live in the city, and they have to get tips from your customers to pay the rest, to pay their bills. And you have to invest in your employees, and you have to do those things, and you have to see it as an equal thing, because if you are taking care of your employees, they're going to take care of your customers, and you're going to make more money. So it's this symbiotic kind of thing that I think a lot of owners don't think about when they're starting their business is, oh my gosh, it's not just making the food and making the drink. There's this other piece, and it's not just putting the design together and making the space look really pretty. I have these humans that I have to work with, and I have to take care of them. And it's the piece that gets forgotten until an issue happens. And that's usually when I get brought in. And it would save the company so much more money if they just took care of it early on.
I was leading into that, like that. I wanted you to answer that question, because the point that I think is important to make is that the penalty for not understanding these rules that change all the time, the penalty for not understanding this fully and not being on top of it 100% and ahead of it is so huge. And the number one reason why bars and restaurants fail in New York, and typically in the first 5 years, is undercapitalization. If you're hit with a penalty for some benign thing that you didn't even know existed, that could fine you out of business and put you in a very awkward position with local regulators. Whereas they could hire you, and you could be like, this is your plan. This is how you answer this question. This is the employee handbook. This is the, what'd you call it? What kind of ladder?
A career ladder.
Tell me about that. What is a career ladder?
So retention's a huge thing in the hospitality industry. Turnover is pretty high, as you know. It's actually one of the highest industries. And so if you can keep your talent and you have that knowledge base, and let's say you keep someone for at least a year or two plus, you save money in the long run. And you also it really does something for your organization, because you can move that person who maybe started as a bartender to be your director of, let's say, food and beverage down the road, and they know your business, the ins and outs, and they're so dedicated to you, where a lot of people just say, okay, I'm just going to place someone in this role. I have this role to fill. I hope they do a really good job. And so you're investing in the person, you're creating a ladder. And I always say it's similar to the In-N-Out Burger approach, where they're going to put you at fry cook 1, fry cook 2, fry cook 3, fry cook 4, and then you go on to make the burgers. And you get a certificate each time. And this is kind of cheesy, and I wouldn't say this is the approach for, a boutique bar or restaurant. But what the idea is you're saying, listen, we're going to teach you skills, and you may not have all the technical skills we need for this specific role, but you're coachable, and we're going to invest in you. And so that person will stay with you a lot longer, where I think most In-N-Out Burger, it has changed, but it's been like 4 to 6 years. They'll stay with In-N-Out through their whole college life cycle. And then even after that, they move on to they'll end up running an In-N-Out Burger. And so if you don't look at your employees like this is just a person who's coming here to do the job, and you actually invest in them and you talk about it early on, you're going to have people who are going to stay with you longer.
So how do you structure that? How do you say, listen, if we like you, we want to offer you a job here. Most of the people stay here for a long time. This is what your continuing education looks like, or this is what your ladder looks like. Do you have a specific plan for specific people, or is it kind of a generic plan for everybody? How do you articulate that value to new hires in onboarding?
So every organization's different. And when I work with fast casual restaurants where, let's say they have experience in this, they've opened other fast casual chains. These are like highly professional people who come in and say, oh yeah, I can bring in $5 million with like the blink of an eye to like build this out. They're looking at it early on. They'll talk about it early on. So we're actually having brainstorming meetings about what it means to be an employee at the organization. And they kind of took a lot of this from like the tech world, I would say. And so I'm seeing that more in San Francisco than in New York. A little bit more kind of like thoughtful approach to the career advancement of the employee. But when you get to that kind of place, they're really just in it for the money, right? I mean, we're all in it for the money. We want a paycheck, but they're doing all the things to make sure that they have this like holistic package. And not a lot of small businesses have the opportunity to sit back before they open a restaurant and say, hey, let's sit back and spend 4 hours and talk about our employees' life cycle and what it's going to feel like to be an employee here and what their onboarding experience is going to be like and what we're going to talk about with them when we actually recruit them. And are we going to do behavior training? I'm not joking. I actually have a client that does do behavior training before they hire an employee. And that is in the hospitality space, but it's in a hotel. And so a lot of hotels, Fairmont Hotels actually does this as well. They'll do behavior training.
I mean, behavior training sounds kind of like a lab environment.
So it's really interesting. It's almost like a psychological analysis of like, are you going to fit in with this team? And the team sets that before you take the test. So hotels will do this. They have the money to put it in place. But I say, just talk to someone. And so usually I say, it doesn't take all that work to build this out. We could just sit down and say, hey, retention is a huge thing. If you don't talk about it now and the onboarding process, you're going to be like catching up a little bit later. So let's just talk about what you want from your employee and what you can give them. And so we're building that into the whole recruitment and the onboarding process and then saying, hey, as we grow, what can we offer you? We hope to someday maybe open one here and then open one in Brooklyn, or hey, we're only going to be here, but we want you to be a part of this and this is small. And if you stay with us for a year, we're going to offer you a small amount of equity, blah, blah, blah. And so whatever those things are, you build them in, but they're usually customized by that particular owner or that team because it's so unique to each one.
How would an employee equity package look? You know, if you were Joe bartender who just opened up a bar and I want to build this culture, and part of that is building in equity into their comp package. And how do you do that without people just walking away after they get that?
Yeah. So you build in a vesting period, and let's say it's either profit sharing or you're doing an equity share. It really depends on what the company can offer. And so if you're a small bar, you might, and you got a lot of, let's say, funding from your family members or from, let's say, an investor in your community or something like that.
Or what if your bar is a knockout success? I mean, what if there's a ton of money coming in?
If a ton of money coming in is the thing, and you, let's say before you even have the money coming in, you haven't even opened the doors and you're having to think like, what can I offer the people that are coming in? And this is kind of how tech companies do it, but, and fast casual actually, because I know one that actually does do this, where they say, hey, if you stay with us X amount of time, we're going to give you equity in the organization. And here is the vesting schedule. This is the cliff. You need to be with us for X amount of time before you actually get any equity. And then after that, then the vesting schedule starts. And so there's this whole plan that gets put in place, and then you determine what is that number that we can offer. And sometimes it doesn't even take a lot, but then you have the other kind of like, I would say, profit sharing situation where money talks. And if a person is really driven by that, or your team is really driven by like just getting hard cash in their hand, and you're going to see it's varying by age. And so pensions and Social Security are not going to be a thing. I might not see Social Security. I'm in my early 40s. I'm hoping I would do because I've paid into it. But the younger generation,
I'm not holding my breath for that.
Yeah, the younger generations are saying we have to take care of ourselves. So if there's an opportunity to make money, then great. But they're not asking a lot of the times, what is this thing valued at? And so if you get them equity early on, it's nice. It sounds cool. But it really depends on if you're going to be making money or selling this. If your idea is to potentially sell this opportunity and you know that you're going to be able to pay out equity later in some form, that's a great way to do it. If you're not planning to sell it and you just want to put hard cash in and get a 401k for your employees, and there's some really great 401ks, or you can partner with Acorn or whatever you want to do. It really depends on how much money you have at the startup to invest early on. Or you can say, listen, we're doing great. It's year one. We're going to incentivize everybody who's here based on a very specific criteria based on how long you've been with us. And then we're going to say that after your 1 year anniversary, we're going to start offering equity or that profit share, is more of, hey, we're just going to give you a piece of the pie. We're going to give you some cash. And it's going to look like this. And a lot of restaurants you'll see, I'm sure you've seen this, or bars will say, hey, it's pay for performance. You have to do XYZ, meet these specific metrics, sell XYZ to get your bonus payout. And some don't. They're just like, if you're here, you're not on a corrective action plan, and we don't want to fire you, and you're a great employee, and you meet like these very basic things that we're asking of you, you're going to get your payout. So it really depends on the ethos of the owner to sit down and say what's important to them. Some are just like, equity's great, let's give it out. I don't want to create too many barriers. And some are like, nope, they have to do certain things for me to pay them out. And those are hitting sales. Usually I see that with managers, where managers are the ones that need to hit specific goals to get paid their bonus.
Yeah. And managers, you're talking about exempt versus non-exempt. I mean, they don't clock in and clock out. So they're not eligible for overtime. So, like you kind of expect them to put in the extra effort to make things happen rather than to do their job and go home. So when you talk about equity packages for staff, it's like, you're not necessarily talking about like large chunks. I mean, there can be fractions of percentages, and there's cliffs, and then there's like equity vesting periods. You were talking about how Silicon Valley model, when people get stock in these companies, they have to spend some time earning it, and then they can't do anything with it for a certain amount of time. And that's the vesting period. So there's a million ways to structure this. And like you said, that may not even incentivize some people. Some people just want to show up, do their job, get paid, and go home. And there's definitely a place in the universe for that. And you don't necessarily want to give up a lot of equity in your business. My burning question is, being a California transplant, Shake Shack?
Oh, yeah. Don't even. Oh, my God. This is actually a really heated topic. I'm not single anymore, but when I was dating people here, this is like a Liz Lemon 30 Rock situation. When I would ask people, In-N-Out versus Shake Shack, which one are you? And someone would say Shake Shack. Automatically, I was like, nope.
Yep.
I have
swipe to the right.
I have In-N-Out Burger t-shirts. And mind you, I'm like an Uber fan. When friends see a new one's getting built, they send me pictures of it. So I'm a little weird about it. But I would say in the last few years have become really woke about their food preparation and I would say supply chain. And, up on the 5, they have Cowschwitz, which is what the Harris Ranch.
What is that?
The Harris Ranch, which, I think Californians called Cowschwitz.
Yeah, no, I thought that was San Bernardino.
So maybe that too. So it's between the 5 when you're going up, and it's the whole, and they may get their meat from so many different places, but I know Harris Ranch was one of their big suppliers, and you just see the cows in the dirt with no grass, and they do have shade.
Yeah, it's a CAFO.
It's pretty hot there. It's just, it's a desolate situation. It's really sad, but, I'm sure there's worse situations they could be in, a large bunker, but this is where they're at. And so I think it allows them to say they're free range by doing that, which they essentially are. But these cows are not living their best life, right? I'm
sure they say shit like, well, they've never complained.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, just from a cultural perspective, I'm definitely curious. It's Shake Shack versus In-N-Out for sure. But from a professional perspective, like as far as Atollin is concerned, these are both very employee-centric companies, famously. Is that the truth, do you think? Yeah. Or is that just PR?
Oh, 100%. Shake Shack comes from such their lineage is just really impressive. The people that they came from is so different than the In-N-Out burger history, right? And so I think that's such an interesting story to see how and it's a great example where I say, hey, these are the guys who sit in a room and have those think tanks, kind of like the IDEO, kind of let's sit around and talk about what this means to be an employee. And In-N-Out burger came through so holistically, where husband and wife built out this company so long ago before any of these practices were in place, and they don't let anyone into their bubble. It's very difficult. You have to be part of that family to learn about their practices. They don't share information. They're not really transparent, but they've survived. And it's actually against the ethos of kind of like this, hey, we want to be an open and organic situation and share how we do our things. But you hear about it only through old employees, or maybe once in a while they'll send out some kind of press release, but it's very rare. So I would say that Shake Shack is extremely transparent, but it does have that feeling of new, and it has that feeling of we are innovative, and they have the touchpads when you go in there, and there is something that's really energized about the space that feels a little bit different than when you go in Out Burger. You feel like you're going in Disneyland. It's just like, hey, how are you? And they're putting the ketchup in the ketchup dispenser, or they're putting ice in the ice dispenser, and an ice maker, which they do. They bring it out in buckets, and I watched them. I sat in there for 3 hours once just to watch them. This is how weird I am, just because the way they do their work is so amazing to me. They will have a smile cleaning the bathroom, putting the ketchup in the ketchup dispenser, or cleaning the soda machine, the same as the person who's serving you your milkshake. And there's something to be said about how careful they are about hiring the people and building in that customer service experience. And they talk about it so early on. And it's just a pretty impressive thing, because you have the Shake Shacks, which were really thoughtful and put so much money and time and effort into it, and talk about it and promote it and have the PR money to talk about it. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. And they're just very different, but the same.
Well, I'm just kind of curious where that comes from, because Americans are famously disgruntled and unproductive. I mean, it sucks, but it's true. You know, people don't talk about American engineering. They talk about German engineering. They talk about, Japanese efficiency. They don't talk about American efficiency. And like, I'm just curious, because like they don't go around bubbling and gushing about how they're making $15-20 an hour. Like, you have to reinforce that culture constantly.
Yeah.
And it's much more than money. And so I'm just curious, like, how that Danny Meyer-ness gets into everybody who is, working a job, and, presumably they go home to a, middle-class life. And like, how do you keep that excitement and that engagement when people are working a job that, they're not, likely to make
a lot of money?
Yeah.
It really comes down to respect and empathy and kind of a family environment. And so if I'm going to go into a Dunkin' Donuts here in the neighborhood, they're getting paid the same amount as someone who's at Shake Shack. And the difference between you not seeing a manager there, talking to them, getting them excited, it just looks like sadness. It's like, oh, I have to give you a cup of coffee. I have to give you a donut. It's kind of like disgruntled at the top level of disgruntled. And I'm not saying that's in every Dunkin' Donuts, but you can just tell that there is a thing of, one, those are franchises, right? And so they don't make that experience consistent. In-N-Out Burger is a franchise.
Is it? I thought they were all owned by the one family.
Well, they're owned by one family, but I think that when they build them, so they're not a typical franchise. You're right. You can't say, and it was my dream. I think I always told myself, I think it was the dream was you could pay $500,000 and you could get one. But when they build them out, and I'm going to get this wrong probably, like I said, they're not really transparent about it, but they do allow former like people who've gone up through the chain to put another one in place. Like they're able to say, hey, I'd like to be an owner of one in this area. So they actually can dictate where one will be and then run that one. I don't know if that makes sense. So they're not officially a franchise, but they actually can dictate where one might be. And then the company will do the analysis to determine if that's a valid thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit different than a traditional franchise, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. They're so slow to get out there. I mean, they're so deliberate about where they put their stores to make sure that they do not cannibalize each other. Like if I were to build a burger and fries joint, like I would do it exactly like In-N-Out. Probably not like Shake Shack. I would do it like In-N-Out because In-N-Out is better and everybody knows that.
We know that at least. Yeah. But here it's definitely Shake Shack. And so Shake Shack, then when you go in there, oh my gosh, they have a manager standing at the counter telling everyone they're doing a great job. Everyone feels like they're in it together. And so I think that and it's a different culture too. California is very different than New York. And
no doubt.
And so it's just different personalities. And so you're not going to get that Disneyland like, hi, how are you doing? Where I do think I am really appreciative of the personality and the culture here more than in California, even though I'm a California girl. I love just people being really blunt and just getting the point across and not having that Disneyland kind of fake smile. But it is nice to go into it in and out because it's consistent, where in Shake Shack, it might not always be consistent across every Shake Shack.
Yeah, I mean, like, you don't necessarily get the same thing that you get in in Brooklyn that you get in JFK. So thank you so much, Sharon Salmon from Atollent. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you about how you're helping independent businesses build better places for their staffs and remain compliant. How would we find you on social media and on the internet? Yeah,
you can go to my website. It's atollent.com, ATOLENT. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Sharon Salmon, SALMON. And that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you so much. It was fun.
I hope you enjoyed this episode chatting with Sharon Salmon from Atollent, providing business operations and HR solutions supporting organizations, leaders, and teams. I can't thank her enough for sharing her mindful strategic solutions while keeping the balance of the employee's lifecycle and business needs in clear view. I'm also especially grateful we finally settled the old In-N-Out versus Shake Shack debate, even though everyone knows that In-N-Out is far, far, far superior. Be sure to check out the show notes for a brief summary of the show and a link to Sharon's website and social media, or head to atollent.com, ATOLENT.com. I want to keep these shows super short and dense. If you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas, please be sure to reach out to me at Jason Littrell on Twitter and Instagram, or search for Jason Littrell on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you got anything out of our time together, you can thank me by simply sharing this with another person, like one other person. If you love the show, please hit the subscribe button, leave a rating or review, or comment on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.